Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Jew and Gentile podcast. We are back. We're here in our podcast room. I'm your host, Chris Katulka, and with me is none other than Steve Herzig. Hello, Steve.
Hey, Chris, long time no see.
We've been out, I've been out and about. I don't know about you, but it's been busy these past 2 weeks, so we took a little break, a little breather.
You needed a little break because dum-da-dum-dum.
What's that?
You
Oh.
are 40.
That's right. I had my birthday last weekend.
Aye, 40.
40.
Aye. And did you, where's your cane?
I don't know.
Did you set it against the wall?
Hold on a minute. Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Welcome in. That's right. It was my 40th birthday last Sunday. I'm old. I'm old. It's in my beard. You can see it.
Yeah. I'll tell you, 40. I can't even remember when I was 40.
Oh, really? Yeah, because you're what, 42? Is that how old you are?
In my dreams.
You move around like a young guy, though.
In my dreams. But it's so cool that you, hey, your wife threw you a little surprise. You should tell that quick little story.
Well, my wife threw me a shindig. She was supposed to, I asked her.
Testing a Tesla.
That's right. My child asked me right before my birthday, Dad, if you could have any birthday present, what would it be? And I said, you know what? I'd like to test drive a Tesla. And my wife, I think, heard that and said, where did that come from? So she used that as a ploy to get me to the airport.
Smart.
She's very smart. And so she goes, I got you a gift. You got to go to the airport to get it. You're going to test drive a Tesla. So I go there, and she goes, you got to wait in the cell phone lot. So I get to the cell phone lot, and I'm sitting there, and I call her. I say, the cell phone lot sign says that I cannot leave my car here, and it's like a 30-minute wait.
You're getting stressed.
Yeah, and I'm like, where am I supposed to park? Should I park the car? And she goes, no, just wait. And she goes, do you see any Teslas coming up? I see a Tesla. What color is it? Red. Nope, that's not the right one. Then I get a phone call. Go to Terminal B. He's waiting there for you. I said, Terminal B? What is going on? So I get to the airport, Steve, and my best friend, J.D. Lemming, who actually designs Israel My Glory magazine, he came out, and so my wife sent two of my really good friends from seminary days for my 40th birthday, and then she threw me a shindig. So she's good. She
was
really
pretty cool.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. But we also we were busy too because it was Passover season as well, and that gets busy for us at Friends of Israel.
Hey, Chris, I heard a recent story of a Christian man who was interested in the Jewish people, and he went to a Seder and dance.
Oh, yeah. Just
at an Episcopalian church.
Yeah, an Anglican church.
Anglican church.
Yeah.
You heard the same story, and it's hilarious. He ended up meeting his wife. I said, hey, I'm Jewish. I've been to a lot of Seders. Never heard of a Seder and dance.
And they've been married for a while. They met at a Seder. That was fantastic.
What a great story.
Well, Steve, first of all, I just want to say it's great to be back. I'm so thankful for all of our listeners. We apologize for making you wait, but we're back. We're going to start actually a new series. We're going to be looking at the temple, God's dwelling place. We're going to talk about the temple kind of past. What's going on today, probably. We can talk about what's going on in Jerusalem today with the status quo, in future discussions, and then temple future as well. There's a lot that takes into the account of the temple, and we're calling it God's dwelling place. But I think this will be a great study.
It's going to be a great study, and we'll be giving information later, but in our own organization, we have one of our coworkers who is really into this, and he's into it by presenting 3D kind of presentations that nearly 1 million people have watched. So I want people to pay attention to us. I'm not giving it to you now. I'm learning.
You gotta wait.
They call it a tease.
That's right. We're teasing you the information.
And I hate it when I'm on the other end, but on this end, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, we've got some information coming for you.
That's right. And nearly 1 million people have been watching him and the information he has. But I'm excited about this because people are interested in the temple, and you got to understand the past before we can look forward to the future.
Exactly. So before we get to our study of Scripture, the news, and of course, Steve, Yiddish Word of the Day.
Yiddish Word of the Day. We had to go to consultation for it.
That's right.
Too. We have a couple of colleagues who are very hip when it comes to Yiddish.
They know their stuff. I
They
mean,
know their stuff, and I think they get a kick out of me asking them. So,
that's right. She teaches the Bergs. That's who it is in Pittsburgh. They teach a Yiddish class actually in the Pittsburgh area.
you know, Chris, as we're talking right now, I think we should have them as special
I
guests.
do too.
They'd be a great interview.
I really think that I'd love to hear her story.
But you can't have one. You have to have both.
They're always together, and they're a great team. We love the Bergs, Jeff and Arlene. Really quick, just a fresh reminder, the Jew and Gentile podcast is sponsored by FOI Equip, where we want to teach the Bible from a Jewish perspective. We're actually tonight going to be wrapping up our Spring Feast of Israel class with Cameron Joyner. We've had people from all around the world tune in to be a part of that class. It's not too late for you. You can actually register and be a part of it tonight, 7:30 Eastern Time, by going to foiequip.org. Again, that's foiequip.org. And then yours truly is actually going to be teaching a class called Israel and Prophecy this May.
This is your first class. You're our technical guy for all these classes, and we now have a colleague who is full-time on that in the background. But when we first started, Chris, just a year ago, a little over a year ago. But this is actually your first class.
I'm a little nervous.
I think you should be. You're out of practice.
I know. This is my first online class for FOI Equip, so please come. At least maybe even
encourage Chris.
I know. Just come encourage me.
He's an old man now, and he hasn't done a class. So come out just to help him.
Just help me out. I need the help. It's called Israel and Prophecy. You like how I took that'll draw people too, right?
That'll work.
An old man who needs help and Israel and Prophecy. So come on, show some kindness to me and come out and learn about Israel and Prophecy. You can sign up for all of these classes by going to foiequip.org. FOI is in Friends of Israel. foiequip.org. You'll see Spring Feast of Israel for tonight. That's the last one. And then you can sign up for our future classes, Israel and Prophecy being one of them. Steve, I also want to let our listeners know, if we're going to plug one more thing for FOI Equip, since they're our sponsor, we actually have an FOI Equip Facebook page now.
Yeah, that's new to me. You just told me before we came on. You have to tell me a little bit about it.
Well, we have a Facebook page now. We're actually live streaming on YouTube and on Facebook as we do this. So we're on 2 different channels right now.
As we speak.
Well,
hello, everybody.
See, Steve is learning all this right on the spot. That's what I love about it. So, yeah, we're on Facebook now. So, hey, listen, if you're on Facebook, you listen to the podcast, just go to your search bar in Facebook and type in FOI Equip. And like us, we'll be sharing news that's coming out of Israel, Jewish culture and customs, ways to support Israel, and, of course, our classes and our Jew and Gentile podcast and other media that's available as well through FOI Equip. So,
Chris, you just reminded me, as we're doing this now, stuff is happening in the Ukraine and Friends of Israel. It's amazing how we're still the same as in 1938, helping folks now in Ukraine, Jewish people in Ukraine during a very difficult time. It's great to be part of FOI.
We saw a video, actually, of one of our colleagues in Poland. And that's where a lot of our work started, too, was in Poland in the early years of Friends of Israel. And so it's amazing to see how the Lord continues to use Friends of Israel to minister to the Jewish people, to bring them to safety. I mean, we are literally bringing Jewish people to safety. As one of our colleagues is, we have a bus that are bringing Jewish people that are in danger in Ukraine to safety, maybe to Poland or Romania, and then they're making aliyah to Israel. So, that's the one thing that's different compared to today from 1938 is now they have a place to go. Jewish people have a place to go.
Don't even say it fast. A place to go.
Yes.
That is Israel. That's what Israel is all about now. Finally there is a place to go.
There's a place to go. Yep. So again, go to FOI Equip in Facebook. Look us up. Like us. Be sure to visit our website, foiequip.org. All right, Steve, let's start our study on the temple. Because the temple, I think the temple kind of gets this, like when a Christian thinks of the temple, they think of blood. They think of priests, they think of sacrifices, but there was more of a meaning to the temple than just those components.
Well, the idea of a temple, had to be something before the temple, and indeed there was. There was the tabernacle.
Yep.
And in the wilderness, Moses got the blueprints from God to build that tabernacle. But even at least while that was happening, or maybe even before, Psalm 90, Moses writes his only psalm that we know of, and the oldest psalm of most experts, scholars estimate that since Moses was before David, he wrote it. And he tells us that we're his dwelling place. We think about the temple where God resided. Moses was talking about the fact that God resides, we reside in him.
Yes.
And he's talking about at a time in the wilderness. He's talking about a time of judgment. That's what's interesting. Remember, Chris, and we've teased about it, but they were out of bondage. They're out there a couple of years, and it's too long for them, and they yearn to go back, and that's their sin. And for the next 38 years, they wander around. It was an 11-day journey. Now you know the answer to why I need GPS. It's in my genes. They had an 11-day
We did that
journey.
with you the other day. We were going out to celebrate birthdays for our staff, and we're leaving. I said, "Do you know where you're going?"
No,
And he
never
said,
know.
"Nope. I need to help you. You need to help me right now. Even though you've got the thing here and over here, you go, nope. I need your help."
I've been coming to the office and driving around here for 25 years, and I still don't know where I am. So
It is in your blood.
It is in my blood. But 38 years worth, and when he wrote that psalm, it was probably the time that ultimately all the people over 20 years old would die.
Yeah.
And do you have that psalm?
Psalm 90. No, but I can get it.
Why don't you just read a little bit of it? Because context is everything. We think that's very important at Friends of Israel. So picture, these Jewish people redeemed. Moses is leading, and he's not leading 50 people. It's probably 600,000 men plus their families. But now judgment is coming, and he's telling us, hey, you get 70. If you're strong, you get 80 years. He's probably in that wheelhouse, somewhere around that age, and there are probably people dying every day.
Yeah. It says this. It starts off right away with what you're talking about. Moses wastes no time. He says, "Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn people back to dust, saying, 'Return to the dust, you mortals. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. Yet you sweep people away in the sleep of death. They are like new grass of the morning. In the morning it springs up new, but by evening it is dry and withered. We're consumed by your anger and terrified by your indignation. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the sight of your presence. All day our days pass away under your wrath. We finish our years with a moan. Our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures. Yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. If only we knew the power of your anger. Your wrath is as great as the fear that is your due. Teach us to number our days." Is this a birthday psalm for me as I'm 40? Is that what you're doing to me? Is that how you're leading this in, Steve? "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." That is important. "Relent, Lord. How long will it be? Have compassion on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all our days. Make us glad for many days as you have afflicted us, for as many years as we have seen trouble. May your deeds be shown to your servants, your splendor to their children. May the favor of the Lord our God rest on us. Establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands."
That psalm has so much in it. It talks about who God is and who we are. We're sinners.
Yes.
If that psalm could kind of make you sad. I mean, it's death.
Yep.
You're talking about 40. The King James says 70. And so while you're worried about 40, I'm approaching 70. And when I first told you about that yesterday, when we were celebrating your birthday and Laura, our assistant, when we talked about it, you said, "What is score? What is that?"
Yeah.
And so it's 20 years.
20
and so
years.
70. I'm approaching 70.
Steve, I liked how, as we're thinking about the temple, I like how it uses that term because I think this you're setting up exactly, why the temple's important. It's because Moses says, you have been our dwelling place. That's what the temple and the tabernacle were all about. I know in Exodus chapter 25, when the Lord tells Moses to build a tabernacle, he says it's because I want to dwell with my people. It's not because I want sacrifices or I want this or it's that I want to dwell with my people. I want to be with them. And I actually remember reading a commentary once that said that is one of the most important Old Testament passages because it's the first time since the Garden of Eden that God's presence came down to dwell corporately with the people of God. You had it with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, but and God would come down and speak to individuals throughout time. But now God is saying, I want to come back down to be with my people, my chosen people. But it has to come on a very, I don't want to say strict basis, Steve, but almost like there has to be rules to this.
I was going to say there has to be rules. There's operating plans for something like this, and it's very significant.
And that's why this becomes important because I actually think Exodus chapter 40, Steve, and we're going to look today at a couple different verses. I think Exodus chapter 40 ends Exodus almost giving way, which I think we've talked about this when we did our study on Leviticus. It gives way to Leviticus. You can't read Leviticus unless you finish Exodus, and something amazing happens. God's glory comes.
Read it for us.
Yeah, let me get back there. It says this. This is the very end of Exodus. A lot of people, I think Sinai might be the climax of Exodus or the working us up to this moment in Exodus because the book of Exodus ends like this. The cloud covered the tent of meeting and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle because the tabernacle had just been built. And Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled on it. That word is Shekinah. And the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And in all the travels of the Israelites, whenever the cloud lifted above the tabernacle, they would set out. But if the cloud did not lift, they did not set out until the day it lifted. So that the cloud of the Lord was over the tabernacle by day, and fire was in the cloud by night in the sight of all the Israelites during their travels. And so, Steve, you see this moment where God comes. He comes down, which is amazing.
The presence of God amongst his people. And it must have been an overwhelming sight. They had it, the pillar fire and the cloud by day, but to have him just rest in that tabernacle, what an amazing thing.
I've always understood the tabernacle to be a moving throne room of God. It wasn't just that God lived in this tent. He actually lived in a particular part of the tent, which was called the Holy of Holies.
And Chris, I was just in Israel a couple weeks ago, and we went to a group where a group of very observant Jewish people are looking forward to the Holy Temple, the third temple, and they have at their end of their tour, for those people who've been to Israel and you've been to the Temple Institute, that they have the ending is you're in this room. It's shaped like what the holy place would be like. There in front of you is a curtain, and they play this music. It's muted. It's not that loud. I would have made it much louder, but it kind of is trumpets blowing, and they have automatically the curtains opening, and then there's a thing of the ark. The ark is there in front of you. That's regarded
not the real ark.
Not the real ark. No, that's in Washington, D.C.
That's right, in some government building, I heard.
Anyway,
that's a joke for all our listeners. Yeah. Do not go calling Washington and find it. That's just a joke.
It is a joke from the movie, the
Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, that's just a joke.
Yeah, that's the end of the movie. But this is serious business on the part of Orthodox Jews today, and this was more than serious business. This was God's business back then.
This is almost, God coming down into the tabernacle is a christening of the tabernacle in many ways. That God, he had commanded the Israelites to build the tabernacle. He gave them instructions. They all participated. They gave what they could to make the tabernacle what God had given instructions for. And then, it was all done. And then to show that God approved it, his presence came down. And one of the things that always gets me is Moses had stood near the presence or seen the backside of God earlier in the book of Exodus. He never saw God's face, but he definitely was near the burning bush. He went up to receive the law at Mount Sinai. Here, though, is a moment where God's glory had come down in such majesty and intensity that Moses couldn't even stand to be in his presence.
What does the Leviticus say? We covered it. Be ye holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. We understand that to a sense, but I think the people who had seen the presence of God when they heard, be ye holy, they had a better sense than even what we do today.
100%. And so here is, Moses, he leads the way. God's presence comes down. And Steve, I always like to say, I think in the Christian mind, heaven is a place where we're always going up. We're going to escape this world. And that when you do die, absent with the body, present with the Lord. But that's not God's final plan. I think what I want us to see as we're going through this temple, tabernacle explanation of God's dwelling is that God isn't just desiring to carry us away into some other ether world or wherever, whatever our ideas of heaven is. There is the rapture of the church, but God is actually desiring to come back down to his creation. And you see that even in the tabernacle. God came down to earth. So to be with his people.
And ultimately to fix what we messed up.
That's right. I always say God's been fighting for us from the very beginning because he could have said, I'm out of here. He didn't. He has always provided a way in his grace.
No question. I'm reminded of a story of a man pushing his little child, and the child's crying and carrying on, and so he's saying, Albert, be patient. Albert, hang in there. Albert, it's okay. He keeps saying that, and a woman came up and said, oh, you're so patient with your child. You're so that Albert, I hope he listens to. He said, no, ma'am, the baby's name is Billy. I'm Albert. That's the way God is with us.
Yeah. That's good. As a dad of 4, I know exactly what Albert was talking about. You do too.
100%.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
But
gracious.
God is holy. We're not holy. God is holy. We're to even put us and compare is not fair. But God is so long-suffering for us. He's so patient with us. And so we think of God's desire to camp with his people.
He's camping, and that's a sign of his grace as well. There is grace in the Old Testament, and you see that God is...
Lots of grace.
Lots of grace. And here is God in his grace saying, I want to be with you. That is why the sacrifices exist, because... like we said, there's a structure now because God is holy, his people are not, and God's got to somehow provide a way that his people would approach him to have a relationship because now there's a holy God in the camp, and so how are we going to relate with him? Well, that's where the sacrifices come into play and the cleansing comes into play and all of those spiritual components as well. But it's what's interesting is, the presence of the Lord, Steve, leads the Israelites for 40 years in the wilderness, and then the presence brings the Israelites into the promised land with Joshua. But eventually a temple is built. And that's you have, I know in your notes there, you have that section written down because it's amazing the similarities between that Exodus 40 and that moment that you're going to talk about in 1 Kings.
Well, in 1 Kings chapter 8 and 9, we have the person who was selected by God to ultimately build a place for God. And we call it the Temple Mount on Mount Moriah. Solomon was that person. David, of course, wanted to. We talked a little bit about that when we went through the covenant.
Mm-hmm.
David wanted to do that, but he was a man of war, of blood, and so Solomon was the one who built the temple, and it was a magnificent structure. It was a place for God to dwell, and the text tells us that the glory of the Lord filled the house.
Filled the house.
It filled the house, and it was a spectacle. It was a moment in time where God, who had been in the presence in the tabernacle, but now he was in a house that Solomon built and God had approved of.
And can I make mention too? So again, we start with Exodus 40, and it said that the glory of God dwelled. That's that word Shekinah, dwelled in the tabernacle. And that same word again is used here in 1 Kings chapter 8. It's the imagery is almost exactly the same. The tabernacle's finished. Moses is standing there. The glory comes down. Moses goes, I can't be here. So he runs out. And now God's presence is with his people. And when you start in verse 10 of 1 Kings chapter 8, it says that when the priest withdrew from the holy place, because now the temple had just been completed, the cloud, same cloud from Exodus 40, filled the temple of the Lord, and the priests could not perform their service because the cloud for the glory of the Lord had filled his temple. So the priests go running out the door, Steve. They can't stand to be there. And I like what it says. Then Solomon said, the Lord had said that he would, and here's the word, dwell, Shekinah, in a dark cloud. I have indeed built you a magnificent temple for you, a place for you to Shekinah, that same word, to dwell forever.
Yeah, this is, the temples are, Judaism doesn't emphasize the temples that much. And when I mean Judaism, I'm talking about most of the Jewish people. It's not that the Bible doesn't or that there aren't observant Jews who don't, but the temple is significant. It's an important aspect, but it's, in fact, if you were to talk to Israelis, most Israelis today, they would say, oh, those people, they're kind of fanatics. We don't politically, to have another temple on that place, we don't want it. We want peace. When in reality, they don't understand that when ultimately the temple is built, there'll be the third temple, there'll be temporary peace, then there'll be all-out war, and then the king is coming back.
The king's coming back. That's right. Can I ask, do you think that...
By the way, glory.
The glory, that's right.
We'll have to talk about that probably another time, Chris, but Ichabod, this glory that's here we're talking about now, there comes a point when Ezekiel describes it, the glory of God departs.
That's right.
He's gone. But then he came back, and then he left, and then he's going to come back.
Can I say, I want to ask a question, because you said most Jewish people don't think about the temple. It's not in Judaism. Is that, do you think, because of the diaspora, that the Jewish people have been spread out throughout the world? They weren't in Jerusalem? Or is that something that's a more modern Judaism?
Judaism, biblical and observant Jewish people look for the Messiah to bring the temple back. Messiah is the key. The two go hand in hand. And if you follow Jewish history, you realize that the air went out of many Jewish people because of persecution. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, surely, if Messiah was going to come, he would have been here already. And so the idea is that that's not going to happen. That's a pie in the sky. We have to do it ourselves. So if you talk to most Jewish people today in Western Judaism, they would say, we're going to have a messianic era. Man is going to forget the Messiah, forget the temple, forget all that. No, Judaism is important, but it's got to evolve. We have to make it happen. Education, helping our fellow man, that's got to be what happens. Yet when I was in Israel and amongst the very Hasidic observant Jewish people, they were saying, no, the Messiah in the temple, that's going to be the center, which coincides more close to Ezekiel 5, verse 5, where Jerusalem is the center in God's mind and heart. Jerusalem, and of course, the Temple Mount. So that's where, if you follow the crowd in Judaism, in modern Judaism,
which is a little more secular in some ways.
You're moving away from the text.
Right.
When you stick close to the text, as what you and I and Jew and the Gentile, we want people to stick close to the text. You're going to see that the Bible has the answer to, and not just the answers, but that it centers in on biblical Judaism. It's really all about the Jewish people.
One time I went to the Temple Institute, which is what I think you're talking about, the place where you saw the Ark of the Covenant and other artifacts as well. But when I was there, it was interesting because the gentleman that was running it had said like 1/3 of the laws are centered of Jewish laws are centered around the temple, centered around worship of God in the temple. So it begs, if there is an observant Jewish person, they should desire a rebuilding of the temple, because that is what an observant Jew should want, because that's what the law demands in many ways.
You're 100% right. I tell people there's 2 reasons why Jewish people can't earn their way. Number 1 is we're sinners. That's the number 1. We break the law. There's 613. But of those 613, over 200 of them relate to a temple that's not even here. We can't physically, even if we wanted to, we couldn't do it. The temple's destroyed. Mm-hmm. So it prevents us from doing all that the law entailed, which means God must have done something else. He wouldn't leave us in the lurch. That was significant to me before I came to Christ. That was I have to answer that. What do we do? Mm-hmm. It's a good question.
Steve, I think next week we should definitely talk about Ichabod. I think because what I'm hoping our listeners take away today is that God's presence came down. There was actually something tangible of God's presence in the temples. They weren't these empty buildings that people just brought sacrifices to pray to some ethereal God. That there was a cloud by day, there was a fire by night. I'm reminded of Hezekiah, when a lot of scholars think Psalm 46 was written in light of the historical events of Hezekiah. And that's the passage where it says, God is my refuge and strength. Be still and know that I am God. And so, if you study the moment when Hezekiah is standing in Jerusalem, this is before the temple was destroyed. So God's presence is in the temple, and he's looking out at this vast army of Sennacherib that's standing out there. And if he read the Jerusalem Post of the morning, it would have said, we're goners, But Hezekiah has this moment, at least in Psalm 46, and the way the whole account plays out in 2 Kings, is that, Hezekiah has this moment where he realizes if God is on our side, if God is really in the city, if his presence is really in that temple, then we cannot be moved. It shakes the way that you think when Hezekiah realized, why am I scared of that army out there when the presence of God is in the temple in this city, that the creator God of the universe is dwelling right here? I'm going to look out and stare at that army and say, be still and know that I am God. God is my refuge and strength. And later on it says that his presence is in this city, therefore we will not be moved. I just love that. And it kind of grounds us in the fact that the Jewish people saw, in a physical sense, they saw God in a cloud by day and a fire by night in the tabernacle and in the temple. They're not just praying up to the sky. They were actually coming to worship him because his presence, his physical presence was there.
Oh, I can hardly wait till next week.
But like you said, so let's set him up. He does leave.
He does leave.
He leaves.
Ezekiel chapter 10 and 11, he does leave. And it's interesting the way he departs, as Ezekiel gives the description of the glory of the Lord departing. We're reminded what happened with Jesus as he left the temple. That temple was Herod's temple, but he leaves the same way.
Same way.
The exact same way. And then he says, but I'm going to come back. We know that he's going to come back, and he's going to come back the opposite way, and the glory will come back.
It's just
what a day that'll be.
It'll be, it's just amazing to see I call it the tension, the prophetic tension of the Mount of Olives and the Temple Mount. They're right. If you ever get a chance to look at the geography of Jerusalem, the Temple Mount is on Mount Moriah. There's a valley called the Kidron Valley, and then there's the Mount of Olives. And between Ezekiel and Jesus' coming and ascension into heaven after his resurrection, there is so much prophetic tension that happens in that little tiny space. But we're excited to talk about that.
I'm excited. And Chris, I got to change the subject real quick. I'm looking straight ahead. I don't know if people could see the Haifa picture you have, but it's reflected. I see me and you Behind me is a picture of you and me.
That's right. Because we have a new. If you're watching online on our live streams on YouTube and Facebook, we have a new TV up. We have a picture of us in a room where we're talking.
Are we so vain?
I think so, a little bit.
Okay. I just couldn't, and all of a sudden I see the reflection and I say, oh, yeah.
Steve had an epiphany. He's waking up to a bunch of things that are happening today.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, listen, that was our beginning of the study on the temple. Next week, we'll talk about Ichabod. We'll look at Ezekiel chapters 8, 9, and then through 11. But Steve, let's talk about what's happening in Israel and in the news.
Well, Chris, I have an article here titled "A Chabad House, the Disney Concert Hall, and Free Speech." And if you Google "A Chabad House, the Disney Concert Hall, and Free Speech," you'll get a number of different outlets who picked this article up. It's actually about, I got this from townhall.com, but I looked online. There are a number of different outlets that picked this article up. And the reason they did is because Dennis Prager is the one that wrote this. Mm-hmm. And he wrote it for our listeners. Chabad is a ultra-Orthodox group that follows actually a deceased rabbi by the name of Rabbi Menachem Schneerson. That's a lot of chaz there.
Steve, I was telling you I had my buddies over for my birthday that came, and we were sitting around and we were talking about Judaism, and I was talking about Brooklyn. And I was talking about Menachem Schneerson, and my friends lost it. They started laughing. I said, he's a Lubavitcher, and they lost it even more. They couldn't keep up with all the words. It's hard, all the different words, you know?
Yeah, all the different... Menachem Schneerson.
The Lubavitcher.
The Lubavitcher, who people still to this day dress like it's 1780 in Poland.
In Poland, yeah.
And the exact same way. He passed away in 1994. But either way... Dennis Prager, who's a scholar, a Columbia graduate, I think of both undergrad and grad student, writer of commentaries of the Old Testament. He's currently going through the whole Old Testament and writing commentaries on it. But it is Dennis Prager who was asked by Chabad, and he's more conservative / Orthodox, but he was asked by Chabad to speak, and listen to the title. It's coming up actually, Mother's Day. He's going to be in La Canada. I didn't even know there was a city called La Canada, California, and he's speaking on creating moral leaders in children. Wow, that's creating moral lead. Boy, I don't agree with this theology. I go to hear that message a heartbeat.
For sure.
I would want to hear it. Well, as a result of that, Mendy Grossbaum, who runs the parents' Facebook group in La Canada, or Canada, I don't know how it's pronounced, said, I will not support any event that is hosted by anyone who is well known for hatred content. And so this article he's writing it because he's speaking to children about being good kids. And she is telling people to boycott him because he's filled with hate.
And this becomes an issue of free speech. I mean,
amazing free speech. Yeah. And lies. Out and out lies.
Yep.
And he writes about an example that happened 4 years before, something he would say was similar. He was asked to conduct a orchestra in a very liberal city, Santa Monica, and to raise money for the orchestra. So hey, Dennis Prager, people know who you are. We'd like you to come. It's a fundraiser. So you're going to lead the orchestra in a couple songs, and the money that people pay to come to watch you, we're going to use for the orchestra. The mayor called for a boycott 4 years. This was 4 years ago. Why? Because he's filled with hate. What happened, though, in the Santa Monica concert was that more people came than ever before. They raised more money than they had ever raised before because people were communicating to the mayor, hey, we're not gonna fall for this.
Yeah.
And so what Dennis Prager is calling for is, would you do the same thing? I'm speaking on being moral. I'm speaking on the Old Testament, what the law teaches. Honor your father and your mother. Oh, such radical words, Chris. And anyway, I just thought that was a significant article, especially in light of...
Well, can I say, though, too, can I just go back to that really quick?
Yeah, sure.
Because it was interesting that the person didn't take into consideration that runs this Facebook page that she says, I'm not going to post or put anything on there. It wasn't whether or not I think my followers or the followers on social media will like or dislike. It's that I will not. The authoritarian no of shutting down someone else's speech, is what's amazing. And especially since we live in light of the fact that, Elon Musk just privately bought Twitter for $44 billion because he was tired of Twitter silencing voices like this to say, I'm not going to do this, or I don't like that, or, just because it might offend you, it doesn't mean that you can just shut the whole thing down.
What's really funny, Chris, is when Bezos bought the Washington Post, all the people who side with the liberal bent that it has, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
It's terrific. And
it's good it's good for democracy.
It's good for all the positive things. And conservatives, I don't know if they were happy about it, but they didn't say you shouldn't do it. He shouldn't be allowed. Okay, he bought it. Now Musk buys Twitter, and those same people who were for Bezos are not for Musk.
Yeah.
You can't have it your way both ways.
Yeah, now all of a sudden...
It's not like marriage all of a sudden. Marriage, Alice will say to me, hey, what's yours is mine and what mine is mine.
That's good.
That's a different thing. You can't have that and have freedom.
That's right. I know that, not to turn this into a Twitter Musk thing, but I do know that he said, one of the things I want to do is try to return us to the best way of, in a private business, promote free speech, promote the rights that we have as Americans. And so, here again is Dennis Prager getting shut down because one person doesn't like it. And I'm glad that he called it out, because you know what's going to happen? More people, will respond. So
exactly.
Good on him.
And that segues to another story, much worse. Anti-Semitic incidents, assaults hit all-time high in New York and New Jersey, ADL says.
Yep.
So anti-Semitism is at an all-time high in the United States.
Steve, in my town of Haddonfield, New Jersey, we had a recent incident of a swastika that was spray painted on, I think, near a cemetery. It wasn't even a Jewish cemetery. I think it was just maybe like a Quaker cemetery or something like that, an old one in our town. Ours is like a pre-revolutionary town, and so they spray painted. And there's a whole, we get all the updates from our town about the investigation that's going on, but it's happening even in small towns in New Jersey. We're not just talking about big ones outside like Jersey City or a Hoboken, this is right here in small suburbia as well.
Yep.
That's going on in New Jersey.
The ADL said that the incidents in New York are vandalism, harassment, and assault. It's one thing to read the word harassment. Sometimes we underplay that. Until you're the one being harassed.
Yeah.
When somebody will come right next to you, point a finger in your face, scream and shout and yell, and almost act like they're going to pounce on you. That's kind of the action that is taking place in New York. And we're living at a day where, thank God, we said it already, Israel's a place for them to go.
In France, there are Jewish people that are scared to wear a yarmulke, which is their...
They tell them not. Government sometimes will say, don't do this because we can't guarantee your peace.
We can't guarantee your peace. And so it's mind-blowing to me that we're living in this age that almost feels like pre-Holocaust anti-Semitism that was already there. It's what, again, this is just another topic of conversation for a future podcast, but it's what Theodore Herzl saw coming. Here's our Theodore Herzl's right behind you there too, Steve, on your head. I don't know. It's probably getting covered up, but there he is. If you can see him, if you're watching on the live feed, Theodore Herzl, he saw the writing on the wall. He just saw the fact that the Jewish people, even in the late 1800s, were being targeted in France, and said, we need a place to live and defend ourselves because we can't be Jewish, even if you're a secular Jew, which I think he wanted a lot of his Jewish people to give up their yarmulkes. Hey, just stop wearing the yarmulke. If you stop wearing the yarmulke, no one will notice you. Well, guess what? Even when they stopped wearing the yarmulke, they still got noticed. And that's when Theodor Herzl said, we need our own place. And he fought for the Jewish state. So something to think about.
Well,
there.
Chris, you did include that so folks who want to access these articles can do that.
That's right. They can go to our show notes on our podcast page. You'll see them on Facebook and also on YouTube. You can access the links for the news articles that Steve picked out today. So I'm very thankful for that. But Steve, here we go.
We're back, baby.
We are back, and we are going to do our Yiddish word of the day. Here we go. All right, Steve, Yiddish word of the day. Take it away.
Well, Chris, what I had to do, you and I talked about what could we do? We're talking about the temple, and we talked about his presence. So, as we said at the beginning, we called our experts.
Yes, we did.
They've been teaching a long time, the Bergs, and I said to them, I know Shekinah, and that's our word. I said, I know that I know what that means, but that's Hebrew. And so our expert said, Steve, don't you know that Yiddish is a bunch of different words from different places?
That's right.
English and French and Russian and Hebrew, mostly German, but Hebrew. Shekinah is a Yiddish word. So play the music again.
Here we go. Shekinah.
It goes two ways.
That's right. It goes Hebrew
and Yiddish.
Yiddish, Hebrew. All right, so the reason Shekinah is important is because this is where we get our word to dwell, and that's what we were talking about for the temple. And I'll even read the definition that I have for our audience if they want to find it. For Shekinah, Shekinah is the glory of the divine presence.
Love that definition.
Conventionally represented as light or interpreted symbolically in Kabbalism as divine. I want to, Steve, you were just in Jerusalem, and I remember in Jerusalem, there's a sign when you approach the Temple Mount, especially the Western Wall complex. So we're not even talking about you're going on top of the Temple Mount. You're just going to the retaining wall, which is the Wailing Wall as we know it. But there's a sign that was written by the rabbis out there that says that the divine presence, the Shekinah, are in these rocks, even in these. The retaining wall, the Western Wall, which had nothing to do, it just held up the temple. But the rabbis even say the divine presence, the Shekinah, is in those rocks. Now, we don't believe that, but...
No, but what we ask, and what people ask us all the time when we're on tour, what is it, since you're already teaching us these are the retaining walls, why this particular section? Why are the men here as opposed to, say, further south or further north where there's a tunnel? Oh, I'll tell you why. Because we think it's the closest to where this section where the men are. There's the ladies section and the men's section. The men's section is the closest, they believe, to where the Holy of Holies was.
And that's where they can worship the closest to where the Holy of Holies is.
That's right. Without being on the temple, without there being a temple, just as you said, some of them believe it's actually indwelling in those stones.
In the Shekinah.
Yeah.
So even though it's a Hebrew word, it's also
a Yiddish word.
That's right. So that means that we've got a lot more to vocabulary. We can expand, Steve. We can go anywhere.
We need a lot of words.
That's right. We need them.
But this is a good one.
It's a great one, Shekinah. So everyone remember the Shekinah, glory of God, the divine presence. Well, Steve, listen, it has been a fantastic time that we could study God's word. We could look at the news of what's going on with Israel and the Jewish people.
With a 40-year-old man.
I'm a 40-year-old. There's no more 30-year-olds in this room, the podcast room. Hey, thanks so much for being a part of the Jew and Gentile podcast. Hey, can I just remind you, go to foiequip.org. Hey, you can go there right now, foiequip.org. Sign up for the class. Help me out. Israel and Prophecy, starting May 12th, 7:30.
He needs help, folks.
Help me, Pete. Please, help me. So anyway, foiequip.org. Also, you can join Cameron Joyner tonight by going to the Spring Feast of Israel class. Again, all that information is at foiequip.org. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for being a part of that Jew and Gentile podcast. Hey, we'll see you next week.